Under the bright sunlight and amidst the towering mountains, a group of people stood frozen, eyes fixed on a single figure. Lying there in defeat was Suho, the once mighty swordsman, now holding onto his broken sword like a man clinging to his last shred of dignity. His body was battered, his breath ragged, and a poisoned look of frustration painted his face. It was as if the world had turned against him. One of the people in the group sneered, muttering something about Suho trying to act all tough with his broken sword. Seriously, was it that bad to just let go of being a hero for a day? Standing nearby, Alex Morgan, the regretter, a warrior with more muscles than common sense, glanced at Suho. He felt bad, not because Suho was getting beaten down, but because it could have been easier if Suho had just joined their team earlier. But no, Suho had to be a stubborn public servant and do things the hard way. Next to him, Suzuki Endo, a mage whose staff looked like it could open a portal to your worst nightmare, couldn't help but comment with a scoff. She took one look at Suho and said, "Well, sword god, there's no hope for you. Clearly, talent isn't your thing." Oh, and she didn't like men in suits either. Hilarious, right? She's standing there with glowing dark magic, but Suho's the one with the fashion problem? Suho, gritting his teeth, looked up at them. The faces of people he once called comrades were now the faces of his greatest betrayal. He remembered the battles they fought together, the victories they celebrated, the smiles they shared. And now they were standing against him. It felt like every bond he had built with them had just vanished in a thin air. "We fought together. We celebrated together." Suho's voice cracked, his frustration turning into desperation. "How can you do this? How can you turn your backs on everything we've fought for?" Isabella, the unfeeling healer, without so much as a twitch of emotion, simply said, "It's unfortunate, but unavoidable. You're the only one opposing the operation, Suho. You refuse to fall in line. No empathy. No heart. Just cold logic." Suho couldn't believe his ears. "How can you betray everything we worked for? We conquered one of the disaster gates. If we take down the rest, humanity will be safe, free from monsters. But now you want to abandon that? How can you choose this path?" Hex Hood, Mr. Cool, Calm, and Collected, the group's archer with the chillest vibe, casually spoke up. "At least we don't kill humans, Suho. If we conquer all the gates, we'll lose our purpose. From heroes to thugs. You really want to be a target of fear?" Suho's heart burned with anger. After everything, Hex thought he'd just roll over and join their side? Nah, Suho wasn't having it. He rejected Hex's offer with a glare that could melt steel. Inside, Suho knew this might be his last stand. The poison coursing through his veins, the wounds that couldn't heal. He wasn't going to make it out of this alive. But that didn't matter. He could still do one thing, take at least one of them down, for humanity's future. If he was going down, he was taking someone with him. With that thought, Suho gripped his broken sword, a fire of determination lighting his eyes. The hero's final act, even if it meant sacrificing himself. The group stood frozen, sensing the intensity of the situation. You could practically feel the tension in the air, like when you're watching a movie and you know the hero is about to make a grand entrance. Suho was radiating power, his energy swirling around him, and with each step, it seemed like the universe was bracing itself for impact. Alex, poor guy, looked like he'd just seen a ghost. He had no idea what was going on, and Suzuki, ever the optimist, tried to play it cool. "Relax, he's just bluffing. He's a swordsman with a broken sword. What could he possibly do?" she said like it was just another Tuesday. But Hex? Oh, Hex wasn't convinced. He could feel it, something was off. There was something in the air, something about Suho's energy that didn't add up. Then in a flash, Suho moved. With a swing of his broken sword, he unleashed an attack so fast, it made the rest of the group look like they were stuck in slow motion. In a blink, Suzuki was out. She dropped like a rag doll, her lifeless body crumpling to the ground. Alex, poor Alex, wasn't much luckier. His arm, poof, gone. Like poof. The guy screamed in agony, and honestly, I think I heard it from here. Hex, quick as a flash, grabbed Isabella, pulling her to safety. They barely dodged Suho's strike. He thought to himself, that was way too close. He wondered how Suho managed to pull off such a move. Broken sword, poison body, and yet, that speed? Magic? Or just a really bad day to be on the other side? As Alex clutched his stump. Yes, I said stump. Isabella rushed to help. But oh, her magic couldn't heal it. Nope, nada. Her face went pale as she realized the truth. This wasn't just any wound. It was beyond healing magic. "This can't be real," she muttered, her hands trembling. Yeah, this wasn't your average, oops, I tripped kind of wound. Suho, looking like a guy who'd been through a lot, broken body, glowing sword, and the world falling apart, finally took a moment to admire his weapon. Hex, watching from a distance, realized what was going on. No way, he whispered. The sword wasn't broken. It was a willpower sword. A sword formed purely from sheer determination. The guy was basically the poster child for never give up. Suho, grinning like he'd just won the lottery, gave one last surge of energy. With a smile that could only mean one thing. He was about to pass out or fall off a cliff. He was done. His body vanished over the edge, like some kind of tragic hero with a serious lack of cliff-climbing skills. But as Suho fell, a system notification popped up in his mind. Congratulations. You've reached Divine Sword Unity. Yeah, you read that right. Divine. With a list of new abilities flashing before him, he felt himself drift away, only to be greeted by the cold, eternal darkness. But wait, just when you thought it was over. No, he wasn't done yet. The darkness faded, and Suho found himself in a whole new world. No, not heaven. Not hell either. It was some chaotic city full of explosions, chaos, and random firefighters. A firefighter appeared in front of him, urgently trying to pull him out of the wreckage. Come on, kid. We need to get to the safe zone. Suho blinked. Safe zone? Am I dead or what? He looked around, confused. The place looked like someone had left the apocalypse on repeat. Explosions? Goblins? Assigned 4, Syndrome Station? Wait a second. Syndrome? That was supposed to be abandoned. What kind of glitchy afterlife was this? As if on cue, a goblin popped out from the shadows. It was like someone had pressed play on the world's worst RPG game. Just when things were looking really ugh, an arrow zoomed through the air and hit the firefighter. He collapsed. R.I.P., firefighter. But so? Oh, he was done with waiting. Without a second thought, he grabbed a nearby axe, and with the kind of precision that only comes from years of practice, or maybe too many hours of video games, he took out the goblin in one hit. And then, hold on to your seats, he looked down at his hands. No wounds. Nada. He was fine. His hands were steady. He had just leveled up, didn't he? Just then, the system pinged in his brain, like a video game notification popping up in the middle of an intense battle. Congratulations! You've met the awakening conditions. Choose your path: warrior, mage, archer, or healer. Suho stared at the choices, memories flooding back. Warrior. No hesitation. He had been one before. He knew this path. But just as he was about to choose, something strange happened. The firefighter was yelling at him to get to safety, but Suho stood there, frozen. Something didn't feel right. He needed to think this through. Goblins with glowing eyes were charging at him. But Suho? He just grinned. Don't worry, I got this. They're just goblins. I've faced worse. With that, he ran headfirst into the chaos, his body moving like a well-oiled machine, dodging goblin attacks, slicing through them like butter, and picking up a red axe along the way. Goblin Slayer time, he muttered under his breath, his eyes focused. This was his moment. Suho stood over the fallen goblins, cool as a cucumber. Goblins? They're like a warm-up for me, he thought, inspecting the goblin sword he'd picked up. He gave it a little test swing. Not bad, but not exactly Excalibur, he muttered to himself. With a grin, he got to work. Swish, slash, whoosh. It wasn't long before all the goblins around him were on the ground. Easy peasy, he said, wiping his brow. But something didn't feel right. He was still seething with anger. Maybe he'd let his emotions get the best of him. He took a deep breath, telling himself, chill, Suho. It's just goblins. Focus. Stay calm. Anger wasn't going to help, unless, of course, he was angrier than a goblin with a broken club. Then, out of nowhere, he realized something huge. He wasn't just here, he was back. Like back to the past. This was the ultimate do-over. A second chance to make things right. The air around him shimmered with holographic panels, glowing like a gamer's dream. Basic sword skills, huh? Haven't seen those in a while. Suho grinned, nostalgic for the good OL days. The goblin sword was small, but it would do for now. At that very moment, a firefighter, we'll call him Dave, stumbled over, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. He was clearly rattled, stammering. Are you a player? Suho nodded, giving him a calm, yep. The guy looked at him like he was the second coming of a game deity. But hey, that's just how Suho rolled. Now he had a big decision to make. The system asked him what kind of power he wanted to pursue. Easy. Healer. Because who doesn't want to play healer and save the day? Healing light F, The system flashed, congratulating him like he was some sort of legend. Looking at Dave's injuries, Suho couldn't resist. He walked up to the firefighter, lightly tapping his shoulder. "Don't worry, mate. I got you." A soft blue light radiated from his hand, and poof, Dave's wounds healed like magic. Dave blinked in awe. "Wait, what? Are you really a healer?" "Guess that's me now," Suho replied, all chill like it was no big deal. His healer powers were in full swing. Before Suho could even get a moment to breathe, the system congratulated him again, giving him a nice little reward, a beginner's sword. He summoned it, looking at it with a sense of purpose. It wasn't the sword of ultimate power, but it would do for now. Suho turned toward the glowing portal ahead. This was where the real test began. He didn't care if it was dangerous. There was something in it for him. "Time to conquer this gate," Suho declared, walking confidently. The firefighter, Dave, looked horrified, shaking his head. "You sure about that? It's dangerous. You'll die." But Suho wasn't having it. "I got this, Dave. Trust me." His memories of past battles flooded back. No way was he going to repeat his past mistakes. He remembered the time he almost didn't make it, thinking he could do it alone. He'd gotten too cocky and missed his chance to heal himself. Big mistake. But this time, he had a plan. A plan to balance being both a swordsman and a healer. Maybe a paladin? He didn't know yet, but the thought was intriguing. He wasn't going to let history repeat itself. As he walked toward the portal, he couldn't help but reflect on the faces of those who had once been his comrades. The same people who had betrayed him. This time, he'd outpace them. He'd level up faster. Time to show everyone I'm not the same guy I used to be. Before Suho could get any further, he stumbled into the thick forest. He moved quietly, his every step a soft splash in the wet ground. The air smelled fresh, but his instincts were alert, like a hawk on a hunt. Something was off. And then bam, he spotted a goblin? Or was it? A goblin lay lifeless on the ground, which made Suho raise an eyebrow. He muttered, "Looks like these goblins weren't so tough after all." Suddenly, out from the shadows, two massive hobgoblins appeared, their red skin glowing ominously. One of them looked like it had skipped leg day, just huge muscles and a serious, don't mess with me vibe. The other was slightly less impressive, but still looked ready to throw down. Suho smirked. "Well, look at that. Big bad hobgoblins. You guys sure you want to mess with me?" The hobgoblins lunged. Suho expertly dodged their attacks, but as he swung his sword, it barely scratched their tough hides. Not good. He needed a new strategy. Strength alone wasn't going to cut it. He had to outsmart them. But hey, if you're enjoying this ride through goblins, hobgoblins, and the occasional power-up, don't forget to hit that like button, because this journey is just getting started. Who knows what's lurking behind the next gate? As the battle raged on, both sides locked in a fierce clash of wills. Suho found himself growing increasingly desperate. The enemy wasn't going to back down, and neither was he. But then, like a bolt of inspiration, Suho realized he wasn't just going to beat them with brute force. No, he needed a brainy move here. Something smart. He needed to find their weak point. And that's when he saw it. His opening. Like the plot twist in a bad rom-com, it came out of nowhere. With the agility of a seasoned acrobat, maybe a ninja in a past life, Suho leaped into the air, sword raised high like he was about to perform a dramatic slow-motion scene. His target, a hobgoblin's eye. Smack! The blow landed perfectly, and boom, the creature collapsed to the ground in a heap. Suho blinked in surprise. Whoa, that was fast. He hadn't even meant to do it that quickly. Oops, he muttered to himself. Guess I'm just that good? After a quick self-check, he mentally told himself, okay, next time let's kill mode, more careful planning. But before he could get too carried away with his impromptu victory speech, a massive hobgoblin appeared, charging at him like it had a personal vendetta. It was big. It was scary. It was probably the type of creature you'd never want to meet in a dark alley. Unless you're Suho, of course. His eyes narrowed. Game face on. No time to mess around. This wasn't the time for hesitation. It was time for Suho to make his move. He darted out of the way, rolling effortlessly like he was in some kind of action movie chase scene. You know the one, the fast and furious dodge scene that gets your heart racing? Yeah, that was Suho. He realized that, with a little finesse, he could actually learn from this. Dodge the attack long enough, and maybe, just maybe, I can unlock a skill. So, he did it. He dodged, and dodged, and dodged, until ding ding. Dodge skill unlocked. He didn't even flinch when the notification popped up. After all, this was just a typical Tuesday for him. Feeling a little cocky now, Suho decided it was time for a new challenge, parrying. He raised his sword just in time to block the hobgoblin's next mighty swing. Perfect. This was good. This was progress. And boom, another notification. Parry skill unlocked. At this point, Suho was basically a walking, talking skill acquisition machine. But enough of the technical stuff. It was time to finish this fight with style. Calmly, coolly, he closed the gap between him and the hobgoblin. The massive creature stood there, winded, its frustration palpable. Suho, now fully in control, delivered the final blow. The hobgoblin let out a squawk, not very menacing if you ask me, and fell to the ground with a dramatic thud. As sunlight filtered through the forest, illuminating the fallen beast, Suho took a deep breath. This was only the beginning. There were more monsters out there, more experience points to be gained, and Suho wasn't about to leave without earning them. Meanwhile, outside the gate, a few hunters were hanging around, looking like they were trying to decide whether to get in on the action or just grab a coffee instead. One of them muttered something about some guy running through the gate without permission, and another grumbled about how it'd be legendary if he died in there. Classic hunter talk. Never a dull moment. Back in the city, two suited men were pacing the cracked streets, looking lost and confused. They wanted answers. "Who's the guy who went into the gate?" they asked, and the firefighter shrugged. He wasn't sure either, but apparently this Suho guy had healed him and taken down a whole group of goblins alone. The suited men stared in disbelief. A healer? Taking out goblins? Now there was a plot twist they did not see coming. One of the suited guys couldn't shake the thought. Who the heck is this Suho guy? And why is he so damn good at dealing with goblins? The only logical conclusion was that Suho was either a healer who'd secretly been hitting the gym for years, or some kind of overpowered anomaly. Either way, they knew they had to keep their eye on him. If he made it out of the gate, they needed him on their team. Simple as that. Back in the enchanted forest, Suho was still making magic happen. With sword in hand, he sliced through hobgoblins with the kind of precision you'd expect from someone who just unlocked 2 major combat skills in a single fight. Each strike was like a brushstroke on a masterpiece of destruction. Hobgoblins fell like dominoes in his wake. But wait, one hobgoblin was still running away, clearly terrified. Suho smirked. This was too good to pass up. "Hey, go bring me some backup," he called after the fleeing hobgoblin, watching it scramble into the woods like it had just been asked to do someone's laundry. That's right, Suho was running the show now. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he checked his stats. Maybe it was time to adjust his points. Balance was key after all. He applied some bonus points, watching as his stats improved with each click. Next up, loot. He found a red crystal, a D-grade stone, no less, just lying there, waiting for him to scoop it up. 50,001 right in the bag. But wait, there was more. He found another stone tucked away in the hobgoblin's body. Jackpot! Now this was the life. But before Suho could start getting too comfortable, he felt a shift in the air. Something was off. He readied his sword, senses heightened. There was movement in the trees, shadows shifting with malicious intent. Here we go again. A whole new wave of hobgoblins emerged, eyes glowing with rage. Suho grinned. Time to level up. The hobgoblins charged at Suho like a group of rowdy kids at a candy store, but Suho was no ordinary target. He wasn't just dodging their attacks. He was dancing around them with the kind of grace that would make even a ballerina jealous. His sword sliced through the air, cutting down hobgoblins left and right like they were paper dolls. Each strike was so precise. It was as though he had memorized their moves and was just waiting to smack them with a textbook. The hobgoblins, on the other hand, seemed to think they stood a chance. Poor things. But the system notification popped up. Chief Hobgoblin level 20. The level 20? Really? Suho smirked as he drew his sword, his confidence practically glowing. This was it. The moment where he either makes a great boss battle montage or gets a one-way ticket to the respawn screen. No pressure, right? But he wasn't worried. This fight was more than just about winning. It was about rewriting his fate. "Let's make this interesting," Suho said, practically daring the hobgoblin chief to try something, anything. The two clashed, and it was like watching a knife fight in slow motion. Suho was fast, precise, a blur of motion. The hobgoblin chief swung its massive axe like it was trying to clear a forest, but Suho was already steps ahead. He dodged, countered, and made sure every swing was calculated. The hobgoblin's swings were vicious, but Suho was like water, calm and unyielding. But then, like a plot twist straight out of a movie, the hobgoblin used a special move. It unleashed a fear-inducing skill that froze Suho's muscles, locking him in place like he had just become the most unfortunate action figure ever. The system announced. Chief Hobgoblin used fear. Oh, come on, Suho thought, grinding his teeth. The fear practically wrapped around him like an invisible chokehold, but Suho wasn't the type to just give up. Mental attacks, huh? Fine. Let's see how this plays out. Even with no skills to fight mental paralysis, Suho had one trick up his sleeve. Pain. He gripped his sword tighter until blood dripped from his hands. Nothing says, I'm still in control, like pushing through your own pain, right? The system chimed in. Fear's status broken. He was back in business. And with that, Suho swiftly dodged another axe swing, landing a clean counterstrike on the hobgoblin. The thing was stunned, like it had just been told its favorite TV show was canceled. But Suho wasn't done. He mopped up the smaller hobgoblins like they were nothing. One swing, two swings, boom, they were out. With the annoying distractions taken care of, Suho's focus was back where it belonged, on the chief hobgoblin. The two stared each other down. Suho wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting to level up, to become stronger. This was the kind of challenge that made all the sleepless nights and grinding worth it. The chief wasn't letting up. It swung its massive axe, and Suho barely managed to dodge, each movement bringing him closer to victory. But this time, every strike was heavier, more deliberate. He wasn't just reacting. He was calculating, setting up his final move. Finally, with a force that could shatter mountains, Suho lunged forward, plunging his sword deep into the chief's chest. The hobgoblin screamed, but Suho wasn't finished. He wanted to break the creature, make it feel every ounce of struggle, and maybe get a little XP while he's at it. With a final twist of the blade, the hobgoblin fell. But Suho, with a grin that said, I'm a legend in the making, didn't stop there. He used his healing energy, bringing the dying monster back to life. Why? Because why not? Suho wasn't about to waste a perfect training opportunity. He repeated the process, heal, kill, heal again. By the time he was done, the chief hobgoblin was nothing more than a pile of bones. And Suho? He was a beast. The system notified him. Victory. Chief Hobgoblin defeated. All hobgoblins eliminated. MVP. The glow from his healing energy made the place look like it was blessed by the gods themselves. And the stats? Oh, the stats were looking good. Healing Light had leveled up, and a new skill, Cure, had been added. Soon, status ailments would be a thing of the past. As Suho walked away from the battlefield, his mind wandered to his next adventure. He felt stronger than ever. Time to move on to the next challenge. Outside, the people were in a frenzy. They stared at the gate as if waiting for the next episode of their favorite series to start. And then, like a hero stepping out of the shadows, Suho emerged. His aura was so powerful it practically made the crowd gasp. The whispers began. Did he really do it alone? Suho didn't need to answer them. He jumped down, landing gracefully, as if he were a celebrity stepping onto a red carpet. Meanwhile, scouts from various guilds swarmed him, each trying to get a piece of the action, all introducing themselves like they were hoping for a follow back. But Suho? He didn't care about any of that. With one cool move, he brushed past them and walked away. Now, if you're enjoying the Suho show, don't forget to smash that like button, because with him around, the adventure's just getting started. Suho walked with purpose, like someone on a mission. He moved toward a man in a suit, extending his hand confidently. The man, caught off guard by the sudden gesture, stared at him like he had just seen a ghost. But Suho stepped forward with a bright smile and greeted the man in front of him. The man, who introduced himself as Young Cholman, was the team leader of the South Korean Hunter Association. Standing beside him, another suited man leaned in and asked, "Do you know him?" Cholman squinted at Suho, then shook his head with a confused chuckle. Not a clue. Suho didn't seem bothered. If anything, he looked amused. As the sun began to set, the scene shifted to a grand building with South Korean Hunter Association emblazoned across its facade. Inside, Young Cholman sat at his desk, deep in thought, while Suho lounged in the chair across from him, looking as relaxed as if he were in a coffee shop. Cholman replayed their earlier meeting in his head. Suho had walked up with the confidence of someone who owned the place, shook his hand, and announced, "Hi, I'm on Suho. I'm here to get a hunter's license." That had floored Cholman. A hunter's license wasn't some everyday document. You didn't just stroll in and ask for one like ordering takeout. What's more, this wasn't a renewal. Suho wasn't even registered as a hunter yet. As Cholman processed the situation, something else stuck out like a sore thumb. Suho was a healer. A healer. That class was usually seen as the supportive underdog in the hunting world. Yet here was this guy casually claiming he'd conquered a gate all by himself. The test results on Cholman's desk made things even weirder. The stats were anything but healer-like. In fact, they looked more like the results of a tanky warrior. Chulman couldn't help but stare at the papers, eyebrows furrowed. Meanwhile, Suho, completely unbothered, snacked on something as if this was all routine. Is there an issue? Suho asked, breaking the silence. Oh no issue, Chulman replied quickly, masking his shock. Just confirming your name. On Suho, right? Suho nodded, and Chulman decided to dig deeper. Mind telling me a bit about yourself? What were you doing before this? Not much, Suho said with a shrug. I'm just a college dropout. That caught Chulman off guard. What were you studying? Physical education, Suho replied, smiling casually as if this were the most logical background for a healer. Now Chulman was thoroughly baffled. Most healers came from medical or science fields. Choosing to be a healer with a PE degree? That was like a swimmer deciding to become a chef. It didn't add up. Why not go for a warrior or archer class? Why the healer? Chulman asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Suho grinned. Because I hate getting hurt. Still, Chulman had to ask, how did you manage to clear a gate by yourself? Oh, that, Suho said, leaning back. Not much of a plan there. As soon as I entered, a hobgoblin attacked me, so I fought back. Pure survival instinct. A hobgoblin? Chulman repeated, his voice rising. Yep, Suho said, nodding as if it were no big deal. He opened his inventory with a flourish, and in an instant, glowing magic crystals appeared on the table. Got these from the hobgoblin and its chief. Chulman's jaw dropped. You killed the chief? Suho nodded again. Yeah, I wasn't really sure what to do with these crystals though. Figured you'd know how to handle them. Still reeling, Chulman carefully picked up one of the crystals. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. A healer taking down a hobgoblin chief solo? This wasn't just unusual. It was downright absurd. Once he finished examining the crystals, Chulman turned back to Suho. Are you absolutely serious about becoming a hunter? Completely, Suho said, his tone firm. I decided the moment I awakened. Chulman nodded slowly, though he couldn't help but think Suho's decision seemed a bit impulsive. Is there a particular reason behind it? He asked. Suho smiled knowingly and remarked that Chulman wasn't great at hiding his thoughts. The atmosphere in the room changed as Suho started to open up, and you could tell this was about to get serious. His usual calm expression gave way to something deeper. He was finally letting the curtain drop on what drove him. Suho explained that he'd lost his entire family to gate shock. Monsters and gates weren't just a threat to him. They were personal enemies. His hatred for them burned like a bad sunburn you can't escape. Becoming a hunter wasn't just a job. It was his way of punching back at the universe that had taken everything from him. When he first entered the gate alone, it wasn't exactly a well-thought-out plan. It was more like, monsters ruined my life? Fine, I'm going to ruin theirs. Spoiler alert, it didn't work the way he'd hoped. Sure, he killed the monsters, but the frustration in his chest didn't magically go away. Turns out, slaying a hobgoblin chief doesn't come with free emotional healing. That's when Suho had his aha moment. He realized that it wasn't about just killing monsters for revenge. His purpose was bigger than that. He wanted to protect people. He wanted to make sure no one else had to go through what he did. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about keeping families together and stopping people from experiencing the pain he knew too well. Chulman, sitting across from him, was, well, kind of stunned. Suho wasn't just determined. He was super determined. The kind of determination you'd see in someone who decided to run a marathon because someone said they couldn't. But Chulman had to be realistic. He explained the less glamorous side of joining the Hunter Association. As a civil servant hunter, Suho wouldn't exactly be swimming in cash. The pay was significantly lower than what private guilds offered, like comparing a fancy steak dinner to instant noodles. Most hunters ran for the guilds without a second thought. The reasoning was straightforward. For most people, there was little sense in risking their lives fighting dangerous gates just to earn a modest government paycheck. Let's face it, if you were going to face death head-on, you'd probably want a reward that didn't make you question your life choices. Chulman continued explaining how civil servant hunters were often talked about as selfless heroes. But in reality, the majority of them aimed for the job because it was stable and safe. Many took on administrative roles, neatly tucked away in offices, avoiding gates like they were allergic to danger. Honestly, most civil servants would sooner wrestle paperwork than a hobgoblin. But so, he was a completely different story. Stability and pay weren't even close to the top of his list. He talked about public safety, about being out in the field, actively protecting people. For Suho, this wasn't just a job, it was a mission. Chulman couldn't help but admire him. To him, Suho wasn't just another hunter. He was the embodiment of what a civil servant hunter should be. He was patriotic, selfless, and actually willing to face danger head-on to make the world safer. As Suho smiled, his happiness seemed so genuine it practically lit up the room. For a moment, Chelman felt overwhelmed, his heart swelling with pride and admiration. Half-jokingly, he confessed that he was so moved it made him feel a little dizzy. Suho leaned forward, his face etched with genuine concern as he noticed Chelman's slightly dazed expression. It wasn't every day that a senior official seemed this rattled. With a soft tone, Suho asked if everything was all right. Chelman snapped out of it quickly, clearing his throat and straightening his posture like someone trying to brush off an awkward moment. He confessed that it had been a long time, possibly too long, since he'd met someone quite like Suho. With a newfound focus, he assured Suho that all the necessary paperwork and identification would be taken care of. Holding up a document titled Hunter Aptitude Test Result, Chelman shifted into professional mode. He explained that Suho's next step would be to officially join by passing the hunter exam. This wasn't just a walk in the park. It included an aptitude test, a written exam, and a practical test. But then came the twist. Chelman's face took on a slightly awkward look as he broke the news. Registration for the current year's exam had already closed. Oh, and the exam day? Yeah, that was tomorrow. Suho's eyes widened as if someone had just told him he had a surprise math test the next morning. For a moment, worry flickered in his expression, but before it could settle in, Chelman smiled. Not just any smile. It was the kind of confident grin that hinted he had a plan up his sleeve. With a calm yet reassuring tone, Chelman explained that there was still a way to make it happen. If Suho was interested, they could register him as an exception. That one word, exception, lit up Suho's face like he'd just heard he'd won a lottery. His excitement bubbled over as he quickly asked if that was even possible. Chelman nodded, maintaining his composed demeanor. It wasn't breaking the rules, he assured Suho, but bending them just a little. Given Suho's impressive feat of conquering a gate on his own, they could report it to the higher-ups and get the necessary approvals. But the conversation wasn't all smiles and excitement. Chelman's tone shifted, his expression growing more serious. He admitted that while Suho clearly had talent, enough to turn heads, there was still a major challenge ahead. Preparing for both the written and practical exams in just one day was no small feat. Physical performance? That didn't worry Chelman at all. Suho's combat skills were undeniably top tier. But the written exam? Now, that was a different story. Chelman couldn't help but wonder if Suho could handle the academic side of the challenge, especially with so little time to prepare. Suho's fist tightened, a silent yet powerful display of his unshakable resolve. Across from him, Chelman's concern lingered, his brow furrowed as he brought up the daunting written test once again. But Suho leaned forward, his posture brimming with confidence. His tone was steady and reassuring as he urged Chelman to go ahead and register him. No hesitation in his voice. It's just a test, Suho seemed to say with his calm demeanor. If he passed, great. If not, well, there was always next time. To him, this was an opportunity, one he wouldn't let slip away. Chelman blinked at Suho's boldness, caught off guard by his unyielding determination. With a slight smirk, he couldn't help but admire the young man's bravery, even if it bordered on reckless optimism. But just as Suho's confidence filled the room, a small hiccup appeared. He hesitated before admitting something almost sheepishly. He didn't have the money for the registration fees. His honesty was disarming as he asked Chelman if he could handle the transaction for the magic crystal right away. Chelman, ever the professional, adjusted his tie as if trying to mask his own surprise and quickly nodded. He promised to take care of everything. The crystal transaction, the registration, and even checking Suho's aptitude test results. Suho's expression softened as he watched Chelman walk away to handle the details. Left alone, Suho's thoughts turned inward. The room felt quieter now, the buzz of earlier discussions fading into the background. His gaze followed Chelman's retreating figure, and a flicker of gratitude warmed his chest. It hit him then. This man, despite all odds, was someone he could rely on. Trust wasn't something Suho gave freely anymore, but with Chelman, it felt natural. A genuine smile broke across his face, and he silently thanked him. Later, the two found themselves seated together, sharing a meal in a more relaxed atmosphere. Chelman, ever the bearer of news, announced that everything had been taken care of. The aptitude test results were finalized, and the proceeds from the magic crystal had been deposited. Suho, still chewing on his meal, almost choked when he glanced at the amount. His eyes widened, and he let out a half-laugh, half-exclamation, completely floored by the figure. 3,000,001. Suho leaned back, took a casual sip from his drink, and his tone suddenly turned playful. Meanwhile, Chulman, still recovering from the whirlwind of their conversation, sheepishly admitted a small perk of being a civil servant hunter. Tax exemption benefits for magic crystals. That got Suho's attention. His eyes lit up, and he practically leaned forward in excitement. Wait, really? Duty-free? The sheer awe in his voice was hard to miss, as if he'd just discovered the secret menu at his favorite restaurant. But Suho wasn't done. He gave Chulman a hopeful look, the kind that made you feel both curious and a little wary. So, I've got one more favor to ask, he began, testing the waters. Chulman tilted his head, intrigued. Go on, he said, clearly bracing himself for whatever Suho had in mind this time. Suho explained that he'd heard about the association's library, a treasure trove of workbooks and reference materials for the hunter exam. With the test looming just a day away, Suho admitted he needed to cram like his life depended on it. Well, in his case, it kind of did. He hesitated briefly, then spoke more confidently, asking if it'd be all right for him to study there late into the night. Chulman's reaction was almost comically enthusiastic. His face lit up with a grin as wide as the library's shelves. He raised his drink in celebration, as if Suho had just unlocked a secret achievement. Of course, you can use the library, he exclaimed, practically radiating excitement. Suho's expression brightened instantly. Gratitude and relief played across his face as he thanked Chulman sincerely. The scene shifted to a warmly lit library, its towering shelves packed with books that seemed to stretch endlessly. Chulman walked ahead like a proud tour guide, gesturing grandly at the impressive collection. He informed Suho that no employee card was needed. He was free to study for as long as he wanted. With a cheerful wave, Chulman wished Suho luck on the big test and left, leaving Suho surrounded by the quiet hum of possibilities. Standing amidst the towering shelves, Suho took a deep breath, already contemplating how much knowledge he could cram in just one night.